Archie and Friends 2, 1992. Hilda says she loves living back in Gravestone Heights again, calling it the old neighborhood, without explaining why. Since the civilians look weird, this has to be the other realm. Sabrina naturally complains that she had a lot of friends back in Riverdale and now she'll have to start all over again. You'd think that if the writer realized she'd have this complaint, he'd have enough sense to realize that the audience might think this was too depressing, and also have enough sense to know that her aunts actually love her, so they won't force her to move to another neighborhood just because they miss it. There's absolutely no reason for them to move here instead of just visiting the place, if they were able to put up with living on Earth so much before this. It's not like we see them get brainwashed into it. At which one of the characters said, Sabrina could warp to her old friends whenever she wants and say that she's just visiting. Without us being reminded of that, it seems more depressing than it actually is. I wish I could have seen what caused their aunts to make this decision. It's so confusing that for the longest time I was certain that there was a story before this that was lost to time. But apparently the Archie fan forum insists that this is the first story in the arc. I tracked so many other issues that came out at around the same time as this, and a month before this. It's not like they had to move here to get a job. They can just warp back and forth to anywhere they want. Somehow Zelda just ignores Sabrina. I can understand the 70s version of her aunts making this decision a lot more because Hilda never approved of her dating Harvey. But in this era of the series, Harvey hasn't been mentioned in a very long time. Harvey and the Archie gang have been totally absent from Sabrina stories since the 80s Laugh comic. So if you read enough issues before this to know that, then it doesn't seem so bad and unbelievable that her family would force her to live here. It's not like she actually had any boyfriend she's being separated from. That would make her aunts look really selfish. But any casual fan coming into this would assume otherwise. Of course, she could just zap up a Harvey, but it wouldn't be the same. It just feels like the writer's either too lazy to explain it, or doesn't have enough comic space and is too lazy to restructure the story so that it would have the space. The only reason they're here is that the people in charge of the comic are bored and thought we'd appreciate a story arc like this for a change of pace. If there's barely any in-universe explanation for a story being how it is, I just think it's meta reasons and can't get invested. It would be better if this really did take place in a parallel universe and Sabrina always lived here. Then she wouldn't be complaining about it, and it wouldn't be a huge plot hole that this is happening. Because they don't have to move here, they could just warp here. Paragraphs worth of problems and we're only on the first panel. Zelda points out Frankie's soda shop, which was her favorite place when she and Hilda were teenagers. Didn't they live on Earth when they were younger? They just conveniently heard about the shop from other witches. It's very lucky for them that it's still open. Sabrina says she's thirsty, so she decides to check it out, instead of zapping up a soda or something, and thanks the mummy for saying that she'll be with her in a minute. I'm just forced to assume that all of the civilians that look weird, like the so-called mummies, are alien immigrants from other planets. And that's why they aren't the same species as witches and yet still live here. But not explaining that is another thing that makes this whole thing feel arbitrary and meta. As if she's just a mummy because the writers were horribly bored and wanted a change of pace. But you have to do something with the characters looking weird to give a point to it. Otherwise, it's just detracting from the story because I hate looking at them. Well, they act just like regular people anyways. It's not like the ugly witches were nice to look at. But it made more sense for a series about witches. Speaking of that, the story does something with Clara being invisible because Sabrina bumps into her. But she still doesn't make a good impression because she says what's the big idea when she should be used to the fact that people don't see her and don't mean to bump into her. And yet she calls her clumsy. It's bad enough she's got a bad character design. She shouldn't be mean too. It's a good thing Sabrina apologizes, that's patient of her. I wish I saw the story before I read the Sabrina Holiday Spectacular so that Clara wouldn't be as off-putting. Sabrina's told she's shaking her nose. I guess Clara can't use magic to make herself visible, or she'd have already done that. You'd think she'd just ask a witch to make her a visible person. There's accepting yourself for what you are, and then there's putting up with some unfair problems you don't have to out of sheer stubbornness. Why wouldn't she ask a witch to cast a spell on her so that she's only invisible when she's home. I assume she's invisible because there's just that much magic where people are from, which can't be this planet or witches would be like this, so it got into their DNA. A guy with black hair asks her if the seed is taken, and he says she's cute. Then when he's offered a soda and called Chip, he takes his head off in a children's comic, and Sabrina and Clara scream, which he should have expected, so he's a jerk. He says he's related to the original Headless Horseman. That doesn't justify him doing that in public. This is another obvious gimmick, just screaming that the writers were bored. It makes sense that she says she doesn't know him that well after he asks her out, after he just startled her. She says that if he gets a date for Clara, she'll make it a double. He agrees, somehow completely confident that he could actually get someone to agree to that. And of course, if he lied to them about her appearance, they'd immediately storm off at seeing her, and Sabrina would be mad at him. Well, he could just zap up a person to date her. Somehow, she still wants to date him after what he did earlier, just because he's a supposedly handsome guy who asked. She sure got over Harvey quick. That's pretty different from the sitcom. I guess she hasn't dated Harvey yet, or in a long time. She gives him her number, and a bunch of time is wasted because Sabrina says she'll give Clara some invisible cosmetics she borrowed. Where did she borrow them from? I guess her Aunt Hilda? Again, this just makes it look like the writer's too lazy to explain it because I feel like I'm just making up the answer. And I guess I'm supposed to find it all worth it that they were somehow stupid enough to think it was worth bothering with invisible cosmetics because it's a funny joke. It's just stupid. She wouldn't notice a difference, nobody would. I feel like this is the first time we've ever seen an invisible person. So I don't think they would be common enough that any witch like Hilda would just have invisible cosmetics already. It'd make more sense if Sabrina had zapped him up. And aside from the dumb head gimmick no one would like, this kind of plot where Sabrina gets a date with a new guy could be done in anything. I want her to use magic. At least it's different that he gives her some dead flowers thinking they're beautiful. But she wouldn't love them. She's from Riverdale, so she grew up around mortals. It's weird to imagine that Clara wouldn't appreciate real flowers more than dead ones. Real flowers have bright colors to admire. I'm sure she'd have to think like a regular person, so I'm sure her brain would appreciate them just as much as anyone else. Sabrina says it's chilly out, and her date says that he can take care of that. Clara copies what she said, and her date says she should have brought her jacket. While he's being rude, I can't possibly say it'd be fair to blame him for being irritable with a date that looks like this. It's just completely insane that neither of them thought to ask Sabrina to make Clara visible, so that there'd be a chance of the date working. Clara was feeling insecure about her looks, so she expected this. Somehow Sabrina's always wanted to come to a cafe in a neighborhood that she just moved to. Already she's being written as if she always lived here and is used to it to force the audience to get used to it, unsuccessfully. I guess always is an exaggeration. She loved the things she ate at the cafe that she could have zapped up for free, but she really believes in paying for stuff to be fair. And Clara's date isn't as happy and doesn't want to dance. Out of complete nowhere, he says he does like Clara, but is just insecure about his looks, because he's a vampire with braces. Oh yeah, I see what he means. That looks bad. But he could have just asked Sabrina to make the braces invisible. She says she finds him attractive because she has bad taste. So he asks to dance with her to force the story to have a happy ending with no foreshadowing to it. Would have been so much more realistic if he didn't like her. We weren't shown Clara and him getting to know each other because it cut past that with a time skip. We didn't learn about what her personality was like, beyond her being rude to people for bumping into her. So she's unfair and hot-tempered. So we don't have a reason to care about her. So we don't know why he does. Not enough to accept her as main character anyways. And Sabrina says a forced, stilted pun to end the story, as she somehow is happy with him going headless again, when she was scared last time. So this story had Sabrina and her aunts move to Gravestone Heights in the other realm. But the actual plot of the story was really mundane. It was just Sabrina meets a new guy, and goes on a double date with him, and some girls she just met. The only thing fantastical about it is the way the characters look. I hated the stupid headless guy gimmick, and I hated the way that Clara looked. I guess Clara really wants someone who will accept her looking the way she does all the time, and that's why she didn't ask her to make her visible and pretty. If he doesn't accept her the way she is, then what's the point of even dating him? This story went on too long. I really wish one of the main characters reminded Sabrina that she can just zap over to Riverdale to visit her friends whenever she wants. She had no excuse for complaining about it then. It just suppresses the audience when they don't think of that. It makes it seem like her moving here is a bad thing right away, when technically it doesn't have to be. Betty and Veronica Annual Digest 8. It turns out Sabrina is the one driving the pizza delivery truck, and she reminds the audience that the customer doesn't have to pay if she's late, even though she'd still have saved them the trouble of getting the pizza. It's interesting that she's got a job. Her getting a bunch of jobs has a lot of potential for variety. I just wish the artist knew how to draw her eyes instead of making her look creepy. She thinks it's good that she remembered to bring her magic broom because now she can deliver the pizzas on time, and she says she should have thought of this right away. She was just going through the motions. She could just warp the broom to her even if she didn't take it with her, which she wouldn't have done if she just thought of this idea now. So why did she say this? If Ambrose can warp to a place that changed looks in all the time since he's been there, then you'd think Sabrina would have the same ability. So she'd be able to just tell her magic to warp her to the place she wants to go, even though she never went there. So she doesn't even have to use her broom. I'd feel sorry for her if she fails. And she does, because she flies into hanging sheets because she somehow wasn't looking ahead. And the pizza falls on her head. Okay, but still, she'd use magic to bring the pizza back to the box anyways. So she'd still deliver it and make money. It's obvious that the writer's too jealous of her if he contrived to wait for her to fail. Or somehow thought it was funny. Ambrose also points out that she could have used magic to put the pizza back together. Anyone would have done that. If the writer thought of this, I'm even more baffled that she didn't do it. She still quit the job because no amount of magic could undo the feeling of having that pizza in her hair, except memory erasing spells exist. So she's still bafflingly dumb. There's still no excuse for quitting a job that'd be easy for a witch if she's so desperate to make money the proper way. Even then, it's not earning it the proper way if she uses magic. But she'd still be being productive to the world, so it'd still be worth it to do it. She just looks no better than Veronica here. She'd just fly higher and never have a risk of hitting anything. That's how all witches fly in the series. So she'd already be in that habit. Has it been too long since Sabrina used magic for good? She's unlikably one-dimensional if she's just an idiot. Then she expects me to believe she's tired of using magic, when she just happily used it. Ambrose is understanding and humors her when she says she'll be like a normal teenager from now on. That won't last. But it's so polite of him to not say that. She says that working on a supermarket is easier on her nerves. She at least thinks that she could use magic to round up all the carts, but that'd be too easy for her. Then a woman walking in front of her obliviously sends a cart behind her into her, which knocks her into that cart. And that sends her into an open dumpster. That's not believable. Then she gets fired for no reason. That's definitely not believable. If he saw that, he'd know what happened. Also, it cuts to her having another job, when she would obviously erase his memory of that or reverse time to keep her job. So the only reason I'm not hating this for forcing drama for the plot is that this is just an episodic story anyways, and she already quit her last job because of one inconvenience. So I can assume she already decided she quit from the cart hitting her. She gets a job as a dressing room attendant. And Hilda goes to her to tell her that tonight's witches' party has been postponed. Why doesn't she just tell her this telepathically instead of talking to her in person? She left her bag of brew ingredients there for no reason. Sabrina doesn't want to magically deliver the bag to her house. And she finds out that it's got live animals in there. That's forced too. They would have already jumped out of there a long time ago then. Hilda wouldn't have assumed they'd stay in there. This forced contrivance making the writer look like he hates her gets some customers freaked out. And for no reason Sabrina got fired for that too, even though it was from Hilda's bag, and nobody there knew that she was related to Hilda. Also, she has no reason to want to lose that job. So it's completely forced that she went to reverse time or use a mind spell on her boss to keep her job this time. This is why it's better to have most of the bad things happen to characters other than Sabrina. Ambrose then laughs at her and calls her out on her stupidity when he was nice to her before. So this should have been Hilda because that'd be in character for her. I mean, he was always a bit inconsistent, but he's usually nice. I guess he had a bad day. She then abuses her magic and makes him get hit by food to punish him. This story was about Sabrina suffering and quitting or getting fired from multiple jobs because of contrived problems that are so forced, she comes off as the author's punching bag. It would have been more engaging and enjoyable to see her with a bunch of different jobs she never had before. But whether she uses magic or not, she still suffered, mostly because she refused to use magic, which would have made the story more interesting. I don't have to re-explain how she suffered, because what really matters is that it's always forced. I suppose it's believable that someone could obliviously push a card into her, but not that she got fired for it. You know, it's hard to look past how she was drawn. Betty and Veronica 61. Easy does it again. Uncharacteristically, Hilda wants Sabrina to use some dumbbells and says that young witches need exercise. Why does that not apply to other witches like her? Sabrina could use magic to get in shape. She could get herself muscles if she wanted. Why bother? If they have any stiffness, they could zap it away. Hilda was smart enough to consider bringing a cell phone along and going out of her way to check on Sabrina. She also could have contacted her telepathically. I assume she had the phone in her hand, and that's how she brought it with her. I like that she's holding onto the broom with her legs alone. Predictably, Sabrina's using levitation so that she's not technically lying to her about making the dumbbells go up and down. If Hilda used magic to actually see Sabrina, she'd know the truth. But she assumed she wouldn't lie to her. World of Archie, 1992, 4. Sabrina says that when a witch sees clothes she likes, she can always make it fit. And when she sees shoes that she likes, she can always make those fit too. But then she says that a witch can't make the price tag fit her wallet. I don't believe that. Well, the people at the shop might know if she magically changed the price on the tag. But never mind. I doubt the cashier would have the price of every item memorized. So she could do that. She just thinks it'd be wrong. She could zap up gold. I've seen witches zap up more money for themselves and get away with using it. She could also brainwash the shopkeepers into letting her buy it anyways.